Welcome back to the Newcomers Podcast, people, where I explore what it means to be an immigrant with immigrants like myself. Today, I am chatting with Dennis Agbegha, who's such an amazing soul, honestly. Gosh, I think the best way to describe Dennis is light. Like, he's like light, like a big ball of positive light. And one thing we explore here is, how does he do what he does, building connections and bridges across communities? I think this is going to be a beautiful one for you. Enjoy. I think I want to start off with, you've been here since 2014, and I know in the pre-show you talked a bit about going back and forth, and I've not really had anyone who have been able to ask this question, which is, I think the first part of the question is, during that time when you're going back and forth, what did it feel like for you? Like, every single time when you came into Canada and then went back home, were you like, what did it feel like? How it's like, oh, should I stay back? Or when you go back to Nigeria, was it like, you're like, oh, should I? Nah, I don't want to go back there again.
To be very honest with you, like each time I was going back to Nigeria, I was feeling very sad, because I was always looking for that day that I was going to come back, and I'm not going back. That's my story. And I know it's different for everybody, but this is my own story.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to just going to Canada and not going back to Nigeria. The only reason I was going back to Nigeria was because I was still working. I was still working for ExxonMobil, so good money and all that. And I didn't have a replacement job yet in Canada. To keep me here. So that was the reason I was going back. Right, each time I was going back, I was like, and each time I went back, I was now faced with the reality. Every day I was faced with the reality of this. Like the life that I found, like in Nigeria. It's like, oh my God, like it could be better. Like all these people, like all of us could have a good life. All have access to healthcare. All of those. So all of those things just becoming more obvious to me, to see those sort of things. So just like, one day I just want to just move there. So it was very, very interesting, and I knew it was not going to be long. I knew one day was going to happen, and when that happened in 2016, I was like, okay, this is the right time, and just go, right? So that was the way it felt. And when I came here, I was so happy. Like, even when I was settling, each time I was there, I was so happy. I was like, I wish I'm not going back again. Yeah, so that's how it felt.
I can imagine, and I like how you preface it with, it's your story, because I think more often than not, I think in the internet these days, people tend to, people say their stories and people react it, and I'm like, but the person is telling their reality, and you need to that's their own. Everyone has the right to their own story.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you come with family or you came alone?
Yeah, I did. I came with my. Then I came, like, when I landed 2014, it was me and my ex-wife and two kids. That we landed. That's when we landed in 2014. Things went south. Late in 2016, early 2017. So we kind of parted ways, divorced. So yeah, I came with family. The boys are big now.
That's
today.
Nice.
I've got a 15, a 13-year-old, and I have one 1 year. How many now? 1 year, 5 months old kid too. So yeah, so I did, and that back and forth and things, like, there's so much story to that. Yeah, so maybe we'll touch them.
Yeah, I think we should, if you're open to touching that, because
I'm fine.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, gosh, I'm first of all, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, I mean, there's no, I feel like I don't know the right word to use, honestly.
Yeah.
But I know no one wants to ever start a marriage and say halfway say it's not working
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah,
But you talked a bit, I don't know if you touched a bit on the back and forth and stuff. Do
yeah.
you feel that played a role in how everything went?
Well, like not to blame the process or things, like I know, like even before, like before we moved to Canada, there were a couple of issues as well. I think that back and forth just amplified it, just made it a little bit, those gaps a little bit wider,
Yeah.
those sort of things. I think that's what happened. If you say did it play a role, possibly, but I think that there were so many things happening all at the same time. That back and forth was happening. It was a different life. Realities were changing. Um, there's just so many things that all
Yeah.
happen. For me, I look back at it and it was like, life just happened.
Yeah.
It's just one event in your life. That's the way I think about it when I see things that happen. I was like, well, that's an event in my life. It doesn't define me, right? It
Yes.
doesn't
Yes.
define her. It doesn't define us. We're still who we are. It's one event that happened, but we just and for me, that's how I try to look at life, not to define myself by events. Like,
Hmm.
I am still who I am. Events might happen, but you're still who you are, and still, be true to yourself, be happy. Those sort of things. Those are for me. Those are the things that I hold on
So, yeah, yeah, I agree with you, honestly, and I really like that point you make about just
to.
not allowing events define you, because I think I'm
Yeah.
going through one right now and I'm kind of struggling. This is an event I'm going through right now, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
you where you're saying to yourself, you get caught up in that sense of
Yeah.
this is not me, like this is an event, and
Yeah.
your worth is not tied to that.
No.
Your
No.
worth is in you. And I think it's
Yeah.
harder for immigrants also because you're dealing with a ton of things at the same time. And so every now and
Mm-hmm.
then, especially for an immigrant, because you're rebuilding your confidence again,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like every now and then we hold on to external things, the job,
Mm-hmm.
validation from people as how we define ourselves, as how we
Yeah.
find confidence. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think it's important to kind of look internally and say that, look, those things don't define me as a
No.
person.
No.
I'm a beautiful soul who has the duality of an immigrant experience, which
Yeah.
itself is a superpower, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. It's just to look at the positive things, like that you get out of it. You understand your resilience. Um you just see life from a different perspective, right? I know there's all that expectation, because I think sometimes is the biggest problem is expectation. The
Yes.
expectation, like, oh, I'm going to get there. All their offices, the society is designed for me. This, that, and many people get in here. It's like, oh my god! First of all, I can't get a job. Okay, I can get this. I can do that. And all of a sudden, you're hit with this reality, and sometimes that could so many things up in your life. That could set up so many things. But I think it's for me, it's trying to, you know, you know, I would say, like, filter, take out the
Mm.
noise, pull out the noise, and just try to say, hey, focus, you know, focus, focus on this. This is my reason, this is my why, and pursue it, right? Pursue it. This is my why. This is why I moved here, right? And this is why I want to do it. Right. So every time I talk to immigrants, I always tell them story. I say, take out the noise, take it out,
Yeah, gosh.
focus on what brought
It's
you
so easy to
here.
get caught up in that noise,
It's so easy to
honestly.
get caught up in the noise, yeah, yeah. So it's a very interesting story.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious. When and you can tell me if you don't answer this question, but after because I imagine that in your head, like you are coming back to Canada to now
Yeah,
settle with family, and
yeah,
then the divorce happened.
yeah.
Did that affect how settling in felt for you? Because now all of a sudden you were on your own and then trying to figure this out, and then you probably had an expectation. Because I know you're right. You said expectations
Mm,
are what define how we see the world, and I mean
yeah.
it's so. Did it shake? Like, how was it settling into Canada after all that happened? Because then I assume this all happened as you are moving back into the country and trying
Yeah.
to now find your feet and get going and all that.
It shakes you like it kind of it's like another complication to it's another complication to your settling, right? But for me, I think that what there's so many things that help me, right? And for anyone that will be facing those sort of things, I'm going to give them the same advice. One of the first things that helped me through that process is, there were 2 3 people around me that were my supports, that were my pillar, that helped me through. People I could chat with, people that were not judging me, people. And when you have those people that don't judge you, they're not trying to
Yeah.
make a decision for you. They're trying to just help you through the process so that you make your own decision. Like this is happening. So those
Yeah.
people really help me. People I could talk to, people that just each time my head was going to the left or to the right, they kind of guided me back to the center. Say, hey, think about it this way. If you can hold on, think about it on this straight line for a while. At one point, you will understand what is happening and what you're doing. So talking to those people, I think, really, really helped me. And it just really helped the whole settling process. I gave myself time to. Another thing is giving yourself time. It's just like, if you lose your job today, what do you plan to do tomorrow? You start looking for another job right away tomorrow. There's that whole survival. Like, I just need to start surviving, and that is what sometimes we all run into. But again, these people were able to like, hey, take it
Hold
easy,
on.
like, hold on, don't be in a rush, those sort of things. So I think those guidance from those people really, really helped me, settling. It took some time, like, I'm not going to say it was easy. It took some time.
It won't.
And
It
for
won't.
anybody going through the same thing, it takes some time. And I'm not going to be talking about just myself, because if I'm talking about myself, right, I'm being very, very selfish,
Yeah.
because I think for her too, and for the children, for all of us, everybody was going through something, right? Everybody, and it didn't make settling easy for anyone. And for anybody that's going to go there, I'm going to say it's not going to be easy. But I think that find people around you that help you through the process. Find people around that help you, ground you,
Mm.
and guide you. Once I finally realized that I've come to a space where keeping it to yourself is not the best thing for you,
Oh no, it's
right?
not.
Oh
It's
yeah,
not.
keeping it is not the best thing
You know,
for you.
It's a Nigerian problem. Oh, no,
Oh
it's a thing we have in Nigeria where
yeah, yeah.
everything is, especially for a Nigerian man. Like, if a Nigerian man doesn't want to talk about stuff, he's just gonna
No,
think
yeah.
about or go drink and think and then start like, gosh, like.
Yeah. So it was so it was and yeah, I can't overemphasize the importance of having the right people around you. People that don't judge you, people that are not taking sides, people that are very objective. They're very objective. They say forget about religion, forget about how you all started, forget about this, forget that. They just want to say be objective about this,
Yeah.
right? I think that for me, that is the like if there's anything I'm grateful for, were those people that guided me through the process. It felt like as if they held me in their hands like a baby trying to walk, and I was walking with them, and they were like, take one step at a time, take one step at a time. At one point I was just walking on my own, like I was like, oh, I'm actually walking, I'm actually going, right? Yeah. So yeah, so it was I really enjoyed just being open. I didn't hide anything. I just said this is how I feel, and those things really helped me, because when I was saying how I felt, the deepest things in my heart, it made me feel freer. It helped me. It was able to make me think better. I was able to change, and the one good thing I was able to change is, I think in my head is changing scenarios about how we're defined by environments, how we're defined um, by how we grew up and all that. And I've come to realize that defining ourselves by all of those things, you know, it's very subjective, right?
Oh
You
gosh.
could, now there are many things I now understand. Many things I now understand. You grew up in this space. This is how you see life.
Yeah.
Somebody grows up in another space. That is very different on how they see life. And I've now come to say, oh, your upbringing is better than mine or mine is better than yours. That's not true. That's our reality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all our reality, and they are all good and they are all bad. It's just for you to be able to say, oh, okay, this is good in this, and you take that. Okay, maybe I need to change from this. Maybe this is how this affects me. I think if there's anything that has helped me settle as an immigrant, is that mindset. Just like not being able to, not holding back on all the things that I knew, or I use those things to define who I am, right? Because I see that with many immigrants. Oh, this, oh that, oh this, and like, oh my God, that's not the way you define yourself, right? So many people are holding back to this definition of who they are, holding back to that definition, like like it's hard, it's still holding. This is who I am, right? Everything changes, everything does, everything changes, right? So for many people, until they let go, let that definition, they just live in the past, right?
Yeah.
And yeah,
Gosh,
so
like this
that's
is damn. You know, I love that for many reasons. Because two reasons, like I'll just state two of the most biggest ones for me. Is there's this book by Derek Sivers. Derek Sivers is an American entrepreneur who moved from the States, and he lives in New Zealand now. He's on
yeah,
his episode is going live very soon.
yeah.
He probably would have gone live by the time we publish this. Well, yeah, but he has a book called Useful but True, and I wrote an article after reading the book about the lessons from there. But this thing, there's a thing I actually opened the piece up, and where I started it, the book isn't about immigration,
Mm,
but the reality is that the book talks about something newcomers face, is how do I integrate into my new society? Because
mhm,
part of integrating means that you're struggling with balancing your native culture or
mhm,
preserving your native culture while adopting the new one.
yeah,
And then you see people who say, um, these people are not accepting me for my whole self. And I say to them that, what exactly do you think is your whole self right now? And they start to say things that talks about, let's use Nigerians because we are both Nigerians, about
yeah,
who they were in Nigeria. And I say to them, the day you walked through that CBC, the border control, and
yeah,
the border official said to you, welcome to Canada, instantly your whole self became the Nigerian fella and the Canadian self. You have to
yeah,
bring two of them together. If you
yeah,
hold on to your Nigerian self and say you're not being accepted for who you are, that is not your whole self, because you're denying the person you are here, because the person you
yeah,
are here is entirely different from the
yeah,
person you're back in Nigeria.
yeah, yeah,
You know, and then there's something you said also that's very powerful, which is that thing about we should always judge our beliefs by their usefulness rather than their
yeah,
absolute truths. Because
yeah.
what is true in Nigeria might be reprehensible here in Canada. And it's
Yeah,
just understanding that, and because that way or else if you will struggle with cognitive dissonance, because you're always like, and this thing is not working out. I'm not being accepted. I'm this, I'm that. And
yeah,
I'm just like, yo,
yeah.
you are going to cause yourselves issues.
Times will change,
Oh yeah.
like, and if I've come, like, based on how like, I'm so glad that every day I kind of see how life has changed and tell myself that how things have changed. I remember growing up in my house in Nigeria, there was no blender. We used mortar, right? You mortar
Yes.
the
Oh, I
tomatoes, you
remember.
mortar everything. And when blenders started showing up, there were people who said, oh, we don't want to use blenders because blenders do not do it very well. Mortar does it better and gives it this particular taste. I'm so sorry, that is BS, right? Later, everybody realized that it is BS. Do it with blender. It is faster. It is more you save time and you cook, cook better. All of a sudden people changed, right? It's time, right? But there's still people who still held to like their blender feeling. I mean
Yeah.
their mortar feeling, right? I still remember growing up, there were so many things that I saw as a child that, even when I, like many things had changed. And I'm just like, oh my God. Let me like, I remember growing up in my house, for women to, like, I'm gonna say this. I know many Nigerians would know, for women to wear trousers was a it was a crime, right? We've changed, right? But
Yeah.
that's you're looking. so we're looking at that vertical change, that is time change. But however, in that same time, if I consider that vertical change, if I moved laterally, horizontally, there were so many other changes happening at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, if there's anything I've learned, is I try to look at all of these things, and I try to come back on the core fundamentals of life, which is love, which is kindness, right? With honesty. Those fundamentals are the same everywhere you go. All
Yeah.
the other things we'll see are just things that we've people have used to define themselves. Those things will always change, but the fundamentals of life, love, caring, those are the things that for me I've learned to hold on to, right? And I try to say, okay, hey, how does those things? Those are the things that have been universally true everywhere, right? Be kind to people, serve people, do your best, get those are the things for me that matter, right? And growing up in Nigeria, and growing up as a Christian, now I understand those teachings that say, like I think it's somewhere in the Bible where,
Love your neighbor as
Jesus,
yourself. That's all those
yeah,
sort of things.
and Jesus talked about all that stuff about, like, when I was in prison, you didn't come to visit
Oh
me, all of
yeah.
that,
Oh
and people would say,
yeah.
but this guy, he was always going to church, he was like that. He was like, no, that's that one. That's the one that I count as righteousness. Or the guy that was on the cross, he was a criminal, right? He was a criminal, right? And he was nailed there. And this other guy say, hey, if you are this, save yourself. This other guy was like, bro, forget this guy, man. No, well, take your time, at that point. And he looks at that guy and says, tomorrow, you'll be with me in paradise, right? So what has those things taught me? Those things that taught me about, like, if I can hold on to love, if I can hold on to kindness, if I you can love to learn how to serve the people in my community, that's all I need, and you're going to fit in everywhere you go. For anyone listening, that is it. And that is why when I go with that mindset, I find myself accepted in every space that I go in, right? Because I'm going there to love, I'm going there to care, I'm going there to, to give my best, right? So I know it is a huge topic. I was in an event and somebody says, well, the spaces were not made for us. Every space is made for something, right?
Hmm.
If you think about inclusion and all that, this is a term that, as we begin, it's something is like flying the boats. I mean, flying the plane and building it,
Yeah.
right? If
Yeah.
you think about Nigeria, look at how our spaces, how were they created? Were they created for other people? They're not,
Yeah.
right? Everywhere is the same thing all over the world, right? So and yes, it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right for people to treat other people wrong. So
Mm.
it doesn't make it right, right? But it's just showing up in those spaces and bringing that value. Like, hey, what is the value I bring in here? It's all about value. It's all about value. It's not about color. It's not about your qualifications, right? Because looking at that story, Jesus on the cross and all that, the other guy was looking at based on his qualifications, based on you're a child of God, you are this, you have power, you have healed, bro, you shouldn't be here. And sometimes that is how we see life. I show up, I have 10 degrees. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? Like that's how people feel. But it's all about value. You can have all of those degrees and you're not putting any value on the floor, on the ground. You're not doing anything, right? So um, I know, and I'm going to still say that, I'm just saying how I feel and how I go into these spaces. It's just to love, just to care for people, just to be there, just to say, hey, and when you keep doing this, all of a sudden, people start seeing you as one of us. Right? People start seeing as one of us. I'm not saying there are not going to be some crazy people out there.
They will, man.
Crazy, there are crazy people out there,
Yeah.
but it's just doing no best. Sorry, I've just been
No,
ranting.
no, honestly. No, honestly, no, no. I think that I think that what you're saying is pretty important because for me the take there, and I have those thoughts too in a way, is that so you bring value to the table,
Yeah.
but there's also kind of understanding that this doesn't justify the people who will be silly or people who will misbehave.
No.
But there's also understanding that these spaces are those spaces, and your job is to, while you're bringing value, also approach it with a sense of love and empathy and connection, and just a sense of understanding where's this person coming from. Of course, you will meet people who will be crazy and stuff, but I also assume that you also meet people who will be amazing and who will understand you and accept you for who you are, and just focus on those people and do what you need to do and build those connections, because that's really all what we can do is just build the connections and do our work. I mean, it doesn't, like, again, because people tend to misunderstand those things. It doesn't justify people who treat others bad. It doesn't justify racism. It just, I think the question is, don't feel like a victim. That's, for me, that's the biggest thing. Don't feel like a victim, and approach this thing with a sense of, I'm going to come here with an open mind and just try to build connections with people and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, and you're going to find your own paths, right? I don't think that you're going to be accepted everywhere, right? But you're going to build your own paths. You're going to build your own spaces. If you think about people who've come before us, right? Even though like they face serious racism, at the end, they created their own space. They also created their own paths.
Yeah.
And when they had the opportunity, showed who they really were. And that is how they built allies who started fighting for them. Trying to say, oh my God, these guys are not the way you think they are. And you start building allies. It's all about I know it takes time, to do that. But that's the way they do it. They did it. I think we live in a time with we're living this time that we're so blessed to live in this time. I can't imagine talking to like imagine people who've been here like maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Their reality is so different from our reality today. What we have it's so good compared to what they had. It's not that we're there, but every day we're going to keep changing. We're going to keep changing. We're going to keep trying to make it better and better, right? So I think it's all our responsibilities to make a difference. When you get in there, hold the door, make sure that after you leave that place, if somebody wants somebody like you back in that space because of you made a huge difference. So and that's for me the way I always want to think about it.
Yeah, you're right. Like, you're right about that thing about the time. I interviewed this fella. You probably will know him, Clint Boudram. He's in TD, so
TD,
he was on the podcast too. His episode will probably be live before yours goes live too. but here he said something that I just can't stop thinking about, because he moved here when he was, I think he moved here when he was in high school or something.
Yeah.
So that's a long time ago. He said to me, Dozie, he said, I'm going to paraphrase him as much as I can. He said, Dozie, look, let's just imagine something. If you told me 20 years back, you said, hey, Clint, in 20 years' time, you'll be working in an organization where your manager is black, your VP is black, you're helping black people find their way, and you're enjoying your job and you're getting paid. He'll be like, oh, come on, Dozie, you're joking. You're joking. No, that's not possible. It is not possible. He said, Dozie, but that's what I'm doing today. And you're right about that thing where I think it takes time. Like, I think we want the world to change really fast, but the world doesn't change as fast as we want it to change. Biases are hard. Building communities is hard work. It takes time to change things.
And as you're breaking one, you're building another.
Oh yeah.
Right. That's so you see how it is. You're breaking one, you're building another.
Oh yeah.
You're including one, you're excluding another.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's a very, very interesting.
Oh yeah.
It's a continuous, that whole continuous improvement process, right? But so blessed to be here today, and I couldn't imagine like when Clint's, their days, how they felt. I imagine it must have been crazy.
Yeah. No, that's not funny. That's not funny at all. So we're rounding up right now, and I really like where this conversation has gone. I think I love the way you frame and how you see the world, but I'm just curious, like, when did you start feeling truly at home in Canada?
Great question. I think that that's a very very great question. I'm thinking about where when home, what home is for you. Um, I think it all started. Okay, let me go back.
Okay, sure.
Home, this whole definition of home started not feeling like home anymore, right? And I think that's where I think for me it's good to go back and start there. This whole place that I grew up, this whole place that I call home, it started not feeling like home anymore. It started for me, I felt like every day the things I stood for were things that were not making sense anymore. Like the way I saw life was just, you know, I had a good job. I had look. It's not like, so if you think about from that, like as a poor kid growing up to get that,
Yeah.
I think I found my space self in a space where every other person wanted to be. Then I got to that space and just didn't like it. I just didn't like the fact that the people that were my father's mates started calling me hello sir because of what I do or what I have. I became chairman, I became this, I became that. Like I started seeing myself on being unequal, right? The security man at the gates is different from me, right? Even in the office, like when those things, I started observing those things more. I think home stopped being home for me. Like I started, feeling bad about so many things. It wasn't feeling like home for me, right? Now when I now had the opportunity to start doing all these travels and staying longer, I started saying, oh, in this sort of place, I could be this person and nobody knows me. And everybody is almost the same, right? Yes, there's still inequalities, but I think like some things that I would prefer, I started seeing it in other places.
Mm.
Right. Okay. And that is where that desire of wanting to like, I gotta leave home. It was because it's not just an economic decision. It's
Yeah.
about many other things that went into it. Now, given that opportunity to land in Canada and going and you know, the things that were happening to the kids, like what we could do, the fact that if this place started feeling like home,
Interesting.
right? So there was that shift of where home was to a different space because I started seeing more of my values in this space, right? So I think that is when it started feeling like home. And every day, like and I tell some people that settling down like home is not a one day process. Even check those people who came 60 years ago. There's still
Yeah.
some sort of like hey, something. So I think that I would say that that was when I landed and started like, oh, the values here, like the life I wanted to live, at least I could live it here. I think it
Mm.
started feeling like home, and since then it's been like that. So it's just like saying many things happen. There are lots of people, and many you would have heard these stories. Many people left home before they actually left home.
Oh yeah.
Many people got divorced before they actually got divorced.
Yeah.
There are many things that have happened before, like that's
Thing.
crossing over. It,
Yeah.
it it already happened before that. It's a whole mindset shift. And every time I always want to say this, that is my story, right? So that I think when I started not feeling like home anymore here, I think I'd left there, and my heart was just going all around trying to find where home was, right? And when I got here and found, oh my God, I found that those things I missed, this place started feeling like my new home,
Mm.
right? And I don't know who's going to be listening to this podcast to say, hey, right now, this is home for me, right? This is how I feel. When I went back recently
I
to
was gonna ask you
visit,
that.
yeah, when I went back to visit, like there's emotions of family and all that, but I was always looking back like, yeah, I want to go back to my home, Right. So now I feel like this is home for me. This is where I want to be. Now going back to that same place that I used to call home now feels like, oh, like I'm going on vacation or visit. This is home
That is
for
interesting, honestly.
me. And I know that many people will not feel that. Many people will like, oh my, this guy is
Yeah.
crazy and all that. But that's my reality. And when people say, where they come from is still their home because of their lives are still there and all that, it's fine. That's
Yeah.
your home, but this is my home now.
I know. I think this is a good place to end this because, like, gosh, like I really love that point out. This is my home now because I think that's a good way to approach it. Is like to say to yourself that this is home now, and because I feel like once you start doing that, then you really start the process of settling in because you kind of have accepted that okay,
Yeah.
Calgary, Canada is home for me, and so
Yeah,
I have to
yeah,
make the best out of it and make sure that
yeah.
I leave it better than I met it.
Yeah, yeah. And like how I sound so positive, so enthusiastic, and every day I meet people who do not sound like that, who are also thinking about, hey, man, I might have to go back. At the end of everything, everybody will do what is right for them. If
Yes.
there's anything I've learned is that do your choices, make your choices. I have found home here. There are people who will not, but if you don't find home here, don't stress yourself. Go to that place where you feel like home, right? It might not be here. It might be back where you came from. It might be somewhere else. But find your home. If you find your home, it's peaceful, it's joyful, and that's when you begin to live. That's when you begin to live life, not trying to be alive, right? You begin to live life. So it's something I will tell everybody any day, anytime.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Like, thanks a bunch, man.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Like, this was a good episode. Honestly, this was a really beautiful episode for me. I really love what Dennis said. Like, I love what he stands for and all he does. As always, please like, share, subscribe. If you know someone who finds useful, send to them. If you know someone we should talk to, please send them my way. If you know someone, I mean, I said it already, but please again, subscribe. Peace out.